course you would rip it. Ah!
Best point of the year.
Everybody, welcome to the program. We got Noah Sariban. You may know him as the Pickleball Doctor. All right, so you just introduced him a minute ago, but I have Noah Sariban with us today. People may know you probably better as the Pickleball Doctor.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
You know, I started Pickleball Doctor like 8 years ago, before pickleball was a thing, and somehow it stuck, and obviously being around Ben helped to get the name out a little bit, but yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I think it's cool. A lot of people going around talking about, what you should do, physical therapy, chiropractor, all these sort of modalities, but they're not pickleball players. This guy probably been playing almost like 10 years. I remember your name popping up on pickleballtournaments.com many moons ago in the 5-0 pro brackets.
Yeah, I think it was end of 2016 was kind of when I started picking it up, so about 8 years, and then 2017 is really when I got to playing more tournaments, but yeah, it's been a few years now.
Awesome. And I've known you the last couple of years, mostly because we have a mutual friend, and you are part of Team John, spent the last couple of years on the bench sort of helping Ben out. Sort of just tell me what that's been like.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, I've been playing for 7-8 years, so Ben has as well, and I used to play against him and get my butt kicked, so.
Haven't we all?
Like most people, I guess. But, so I've known Ben for a while, and then every year I kind of told him, like, hey, if you ever need a physical therapist, let me know. And I think, as the sport grew and financially things got a little better, then he was finally able to have someone with him. And so I've been lucky to be with him the past couple of years around the PPA Tour, helping him, with whatever he needs physically at tournaments. And yeah, it's been a great experience. It's pretty rare to be around someone who's the best at what they do, so it's been pretty cool.
So in addition to sharing some friendships with Ben and others on the tour, you also, looks like we're wearing the same apparel. You have some affiliation with Yola?
I do. So I used to be with a different company, and then when I started working with Ben, I came over to Yola as well. So just being able to be supported by them, helping Ben out, teaching clinics and camps, and coaching some pickleball too. So it's been really nice to have Yola.
So I was in Vietnam, so I've seen this, but talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Not many people have seen that.
This is kind of a limited edition. I got lucky enough I think it was at the PPA finals. I think they were selling a lot of pink paddles overseas, and so they wanted to try to make a pink Perseus for the U.S. market, because the pink one I think is what you would play here with the Magnus. And so They had a few testers here that they had the PPA finals for Fed and Ben and all that. And so Ben was nice enough to give me one at the end. So I've been showing it off ever since.
I saw that in Vietnam. It's pretty awesome. Okay, let's get into it. People are saying pickleball is like an orthopedist and a chiropractor, a physical therapist. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. Talk to me. What are some things I need to include in a warm-up to prevent time off court in doctor's office? I can spend more time playing.
Yeah, and pickleball is kind of one of those interesting sports where I've never seen anything like it, where people show up, a couple dinks, how was your weekend? Good to go, we need a fourth, and we're off playing. So it's kind of like, you don't see that in any other sport. You show up, even if you go to recreational basketball leagues, the guys are warming up before, whatever, doing some layups, and then getting your body temperature up. And I think that's the big deal with pickleball, is people don't move before they get on the court or before they play their game. So in terms of warm-up, I don't really care what you do, as long as you move. You don't necessarily have to break a sweat, although that would be ideal, but something that brings your total body temperature up so your muscles are actually able to elongate and move without overstretching right away. It's kind of typical in baseball when you sprint from home to first plate cold. That's that typical hamstring injury where you pull it. And it's the same thing if you didn't warm up properly. Sometimes in the softball leagues, adult leagues, they just kind of show up and play, and it's typical. First time they run to first base, they pull a hammy. And if you don't get your body temperature up, then the first time you lunge for a ball on the court or something like that, or maybe you didn't warm up your shoulder, now you're hitting a strong overhead, and you're going to find yourself with some problems there. So.
All right, so I haven't heard the warm your body temperature up. I've heard like elevate your heart rate, get your heart rate going. Pretty much same thing. Is that what we're talking about there?
Yeah, I mean, similar. Essentially, the more you move, the more your heart's going to be pumping blood all over. and then your body temperature is going to increase, because as soon as you start to move, your body needs to release heat, and that's how we sweat usually. But really what you want to do is do a bunch of movements. It can be fast walking if you're not very athletic, it's okay. Just something to move. So, you know, typical things that you would see people do is maybe slight jog backwards, side shuffle, little high knees, butt taps. Nothing, there's no secret. There's no secret sauce. Yeah, a little bit of butt tap right there, right there. Let me get a little butt tap right there. You know, there's no secret sauce. It's just do some movements to get the body temperature up before you even hit a ball. Then, worst case scenario, you show up at the court, you're on the side, hey, we need one more. You're just on the side, do a little 5-minute thing to get warm. Even if you don't hit a ball, it's better you just warm up hitting the balls as you play, but at least your body temperature will be up.
Makes sense. So the warm-up, I think so many people think the warm-up is like, oh, I got to make sure my drop and my serve is getting in. The warm-up needs to be getting your body ready to actually go through the motion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously if you're playing in a tournament and we're talking like you need to get dialed in and get your shots right, then sure, you want to make sure you hit every shot. But if we're just strictly talking about body and injuries, you want to just make sure your body is up to temperature and ready to go. In recreational play, if you just go on the court and you miss your first couple of shots, it's not a big deal, but as long as your body's warmed up, at least you won't hurt yourself.
Okay, yeah, I think the rest of this we're going to mostly focus on like the average player, the person you see at the local park or rec center. So talk us through some of the injuries we typically see. I know I see a lot of Achilles, calf stuff. I see some elbow, shoulder, knee. I don't know, just talk to me a couple of those things and what you can maybe do to avoid.
There's kind of the big ticket items are you're going to see some obviously some strains like muscle pulls. You're going to see some back strains. Pickleball is a little particular compared to other sports, especially if you compare it to tennis, where there's a lot of bending over at the kitchen line, which we don't really have much in tennis. And so when poor footwork is utilized, or maybe people aren't as mobile as they used to be, and the ball gets behind them, there's a lot of bending and twisting to get those balls behind them. And the bending and the twisting is really what can be bad for the lower back. So a lot of Americans already have lower back problems, and so when you get into pickleball and now you're doing a lot of bending and twisting, that's not going to be great for the lower back.
So it's mostly a byproduct of not having good footwork, not being in good position, and so you compromise position with your back to try to get to the ball.
I think the two most typical quote-unquote injuries that we hear about that are positional instead of more warming up would be lower back pain and elbow, pickleball elbow. When I see it as a coach in terms of pickleball elbow, it's usually due to poor mechanics on the backhand side, a lot of wrist use. Typically the pickleball elbow is due to an inflammation or an overuse of what's called the extensor carpi radialis brevis muscle. That's some knowledge for you. It's basically essentially a muscle in the forearm that extends the wrist up. And so when you're on your backhand side and the ball gets behind you, you don't get your feet behind the ball, and now you're reaching to use the wrist to bring the ball back. That's typically where people get a lot of overuse on that elbow.
I heard some people saying some stuff like, oh, my paddle's too heavy, my grip is gripping it too tight, I haven't changed my over grip enough. Any of those things contributory, or are they?
I always go to mechanics first before equipment. I mean, tennis rackets are much heavier. People play tennis and never have tennis elbows. So I think good.
Well, I can't never have tennis elbow if there's something called tennis elbow.
Well, they do, but I'm just saying, it's
less frequent, I guess, than you were seeing in the pickleball court.
I think it's the same as golf or tennis. Like, good mechanics always beats anything else. And it's just, to me, if you're actively having pain in your elbow, you need to get it taken care of. So whether that's physical therapy or however you get the pain down until you don't have pain. But then once the problem's not painful, you have to go back and hire, a good coach like Mr. Josh over here, who can actually look at your pickleball mechanics and tell you, hey, are you hitting the ball right? And sometimes your mechanics might be fine, but if the footwork's not there, you're going to end up into bad mechanic position, and then that's going to go to your elbow and you're going to suffer from that. So
makes a lot of sense. I think another thing we typically hear is sort of calves and Achilles. I think just what I'm hearing, like seeing, most time people are a little bit reluctant to get to the kitchen. They stay at the baseline, and it's that sort of drop step motion that they aren't used to, coming right from office. How can you sort of warm that up to prevent that?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that I have is, one, obviously the warming up part, making sure you spend 5-10 minutes moving, getting up on your toes and down, just activating the calf muscle. But the other thing I see is sometimes at the lower level, some 3-0 kind of general rec play, I just see people not knowing the game well enough. And that leads to a lot of reaction instead of anticipation. And so I would say go on YouTube and just watch the pros, watch the first 4 or 5 shots of the rally. Don't get into the firefights and all. That's not the important part, but just understanding where you need to be on the court so that you're not last second reacting to go get that ball, which if you had known the game a little better, you would know that ball was going to be there. And I think when you combine the knowledge of the game plus the warming up of the body, that helps to, take away some of that last second decision where you're now actually pushing off harder. Because if you watch Ben play, the guy is kind of lazy. And he doesn't like to push off very hard.
He has efficient footwork.
He's very efficient. He knows the game extremely well. He's very efficient, and he doesn't like to push off hard. You rarely see him do that, and that's because he's always positioned well, always good position, and leads to good shots. And then for him, hitting the ball is the easy part.
Okay, awesome. Two other things I want to get into. One is like, when do I go see a doctor? When do I make an appointment? Are there certain joints that are like, okay, if that's bugging you, that's probably go see a doctor. That one. And just sort of talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk out there sometimes about physical therapists and chiropractors not liking each other, and I have no problem whatsoever. I've met great chiropractors, I've met terrible physical therapists. So, I think when both of them are great, they're very similar in how they approach problems. What I will say is that it's often easier to get in to see a physical therapist or a chiropractor than it is to see a doctor, because they're often busier, and you might get more time out of the PT or the chiropractor. So what I would do is, if it's an orthopedic issue, and what I mean by orthopedic is some kind of injury from the court, if it seems medical based, then you want to go and get that checked out from a doctor.
So orthopedic, some injury from the...
So muscles, joints, things like that, right? Yeah. So if it seems like it's a pain that came out of nowhere and it's worse at night and it doesn't make any sense, then that's more of a medical problem. You want to get actively treated. But it doesn't really matter. If you go see a competent physical therapist or chiropractor and it's a medical issue, they'll refer you out to a medical doctor. But essentially, most states, I think, now have what's called direct access for physical therapy. And so that means that you don't need to contact your doctor before you go see a physical therapist. So if you've worked with someone in the past you like, something happened on the court, hey, I would not wait 2 weeks hoping it gets better. That's usually the biggest thing I see is people come to me 3-4 weeks after they've been in pain because they thought it was going to get better and now it's not. And now we're 4 weeks down the line when we could have treated that 4 weeks earlier. And usually the more you wait, the tougher it is to treat the problem. So I would say if something happens, yeah, maybe give it a day or two. If it seems like it's feeling a lot better, great, you're good to go. But if it seems like, hey, this is still bothering me, call up your physical therapist that you trust, say, hey, I'd like to come in. The best thing I would do is a full examination of the physical therapist. He'll be able to determine not only what the problem is and how to address it, but maybe what could have contributed to the problem. A lot of times, let's take the ankle sprain as an example. There's plenty of research showing that ankle sprains are not usually isolated. It's usually connected because there might be some firing patterns or activation in the muscles up the chain that are not doing their thing, which leads to injury. So it's a good thing to get a bit of an evaluation and see what's going on there.
Awesome. Last thing I have for you, like I hear ice bath, I hear dry needling, cupping, sauna, stim. Is it all snake oil? Does some of it work? Tell me, like, let's be honest. Be honest.
A little bit of snake oil. So the truth of the matter is there's really 3 ways to go about giving the best treatment to someone. 1 is evidence, so medical literature that's out there. 2 is the expertise of the clinician, and 3 is the patient or the person's experience. And so when you combine all 3 of those things, that's when you get the best results. So in terms of the medical evidence, there's not a whole lot of support for all those kind of modalities, like heat, ice, cold. There's no long-term really benefits that has been shown. But again, studies are hard to do for that. So it's not that it doesn't work, it's that there's not a whole lot of evidence for it. So that's one of the 3. Clinician expertise, from what I've seen in the past 15 years of being a physical therapist, is that it's very person dependent. Some people respond really well, others it doesn't do anything. And I've experienced that personally when, for example, I've used to play basketball and sprain. I know you can tell I'm pretty tall. But sprained some ankles, and to me, ice never felt good. Some people, ice feels great. And so I would say clinically, I've seen some modalities work well. Like what I like to do is compression. So elevation, and people are right away going to go to rice, and you have to ice that thing. And it's kind of interesting. The doctor that came up with this rice thing now says the opposite. He came up with that 40 years ago. People are still using it. So to me, recovery is all about blood flow. And so if you can maximize blood flow, then you have a good chance of getting out the bad metabolites and the toxins that you where on the court you played hard, now you got to recover for the next day, for example, or the next match. So anything that's going to boost your blood flow. So going from heat to cold, cold to hot, doing some compression, elevation, doing some light cycling, some light movement, all those things I think are probably beneficial. But again, if something seems to be working for you, do it. If it doesn't seem to work, don't do it. That's probably the best advice.
Probably the one that people don't want to hear, but like, how important is rest in recovery?
How important is rest? Yeah, pickleball players have a tough time with that.
Yeah.
It's too much fun.
Yeah.
They're out there 7 days a week for
They'd
5
rather
hours
put
a
two
day.
braces on,
Oh,
do
you
the
see it
cold
every day.
plunge, do
Yeah,
the stim, do that,
yeah.
just so they can get there back the next day. But sometimes maybe taking 3, 4, 5 a week off or so. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if that's probably a little excessive. If there's something that's still bugging you after 3, 4 days of rest, it's probably that there's some underlying thing, which is where I would go and consult with a physical therapist and see, hey, even if you have no pain, just am I good here movement-wise? Am I doing stuff, or is there something going on? But typically, I would say if you've been on a streak where you're playing every day, it doesn't hurt to take a couple days off and do something else. Probably good for your game too.
All right. Well, with that said, let's go play some more games. Thanks, buddy.